Well, hello, good people. Mark Holmes here, and as always, I appreciate each and every one of you guys for being here and being part of Joe Boo's day job. You know, we've been working on this red brick house for quite a while, and I have to say, I have learned a lot about brick. Um, there's a big difference between old brick and modern brick. For example, new brick that's made now is hardened and it doesn't really expand and contract. And the masonry of the cement that you use is hard. Here's the problem. This structure right here, they're handmade bricks. And the handmade bricks and the lime mortar, which is lime and sand put together, is actually a soft cement, okay? It expands and contracts and moisture penetrates in and out. And everything about this is opposite to what we do now. For example, this brick has to breathe. It allows the moisture and things to go through. If you look up at the top of the chimney up there, some of the chimney, the bricks and stuff are loose because the mortar and stuff has gotten messed up. The thing is the brick heats up with the heating and the cold and everything else that you put on the inside of the house. Because there's no heat for the chimneys being used, moisture gets into the chimney bricks. It freezes and thaws, and ends up loosening up the mortar. The fix that you actually have is, if you're going to actually use the chimneys, is you actually need to go ahead and basically make pillars on the outside of it and put a solid piece on top of a piece of maybe limestone or granite and things like that, so the moisture rolls off of it and doesn't permeate into it. Or use the chimneys, because the heat from the brick, from the fires, actually keeps it from freezing and thawing. So that's the first thing. The second problem, and people will go through and they'll do things with old brick, like painting it. Painting it with the old paint is the worst thing. Now, they do have new paint that is better, that's more advantageous to work with, that is supposedly breathable, but ultimately you don't want to paint the brick because it can't have that moisture exchange. And so when you're plastering, what you have to do when you're plastering is you actually get the brick saturated. You're actually going to take and spray that brick down for days to get the moisture in there, so when you put the lime mortar on it, it ends up being able to dry slowly. It's not getting it sucked out of it where it's going to make the lime itself plaster as strong. So that's the next thing you got to deal with. And so people will say, you know, when we're talking about taking off the masonry off of the chimney, off the brick, people are saying, oh, just drywall over it. Well, see, drywall is actually the exact opposite thing of what you want to do, because drywall, like it says, is dry wall. The gypsum and stuff dry out. And if you use drywall, that natural moisture that's going to be coming in and out of the brick is going to end up wetting the drywall, and eventually you're going to get mold. Another problem you have is, and this is a discussion that I actually had with the building inspector, and he had to actually go through because he didn't know, and most people don't. If you go through, and let's say on the old part of the house here, I decided I'm going to frame up around it, or I'm going to go ahead and put sleepers on there, I'm going to insulate it and then put drywall on it, you are literally giving a death sentence to the brick. It's not going to be something that happens in 1 year or 2 years, but through the course of time, that moisture that's trying to go in and out is now stopped right there, and it's now not going to be able to get the heating that it once did, and so then the brick and stuff are going to sit there and thaw. So my problem and dilemma is in the basement is about putting the insulation in the floors and making sure it doesn't touch the walls. And that's where I had to say, if we put that onto the walls, it's not going to be able to make that exchange. So other people say, paint the brick white, paint the brick brown, paint the brick. Don't paint the brick. You can't paint the brick. You don't paint the brick. Part of the problems in this house is because people painted the brick. The other thing you have to deal with too, and this is just a matter of not knowing. When I first got the house, and part of the worry for people was, you can see down here where the brick looks nice and pretty, because I had a brick mason come through and fix that. Right here on this corner and that corner, the brick literally was blown out. And the reason being is because when they came through to fix it, they ended up using regular bricks and regular mortar. And because that didn't freeze and thaw, and the other problem is the gutter, of course, is leaking, so there's a lot of water. But because it doesn't freeze and thaw and expand and contract like the regular brick, the house literally rejected it. It was just like it kicked it out, kind of like a mismatched kidney in a person. A body rejects it. So one of the things that we're going to do is any of the paint that's loose, we're going to scrape it off and just let it kind of come off naturally, because you can't really just power wash it or sandblast it because the brick are soft. But you also too don't want to necessarily have the brick painted. So it's a dilemma that we have to deal with. And so we're going to go through on the inside of the house, and we're just going to go through, and we're going to end up replastering the walls with our lime plaster and allow it to do what it's always done. And I know what you're thinking, well, what about insulation? Well, we'll be insulating the floor underneath, and we're putting blown-in insulation in the top. The good thing is our rafters are actually on top of the brick wall. So when we put the insulation in on top, that's going to end up giving us a nice R value in here. But ultimately, the thing about this house is, even when it's hot out, it's still cooler inside because of the natural convection that it has through the way it was designed. And the other thing is when the brick gets warm, it stays warm. And when the brick gets cold, it stays cold. So when you come out here on a day that here in the valley, it gets cold at night, or it's cooler at night, this kind of gets cold. It warms up and it's hot outside, but this is almost like a refrigerator. You've got about 16 inches of brick wall. So once you end up warming the place up, you'll get the radiant heat from it. So that's a little lesson on problems you have with the bricks. The bricks that weren't messed with, they're still, look, you can look over here, over top of our areaway that we have. This is the 200-year-old bricks. Look at that. You can see the mortar. The mortar is still solid. That lime mortar, if you treat this right, it'll be here for another 200 years. If you go through and you drywall those walls and not allow it to breathe, you're going to have problems with it. And so that's the lesson that I've learned working here on this red brick house about the brick. So, oh, they got the vacuum going. I'll come back in there with you. So I'm working on the plastering, and okay, now here's the thing. It's about $50 for a pre-mixed bucket of the plaster, and I'm learning a lot. One of the things I've found out that, okay, it's basically 2 to 1. So you put in a bucket of sand, and then I put in a bucket, I put a bucket of the lime in it, and then you put in 2 more buckets of sand. I'm sorry, another bucket of sand. And you mix that for about 5 minutes, dry. And the thing with this lime plaster is it actually gets its moisture from the longer you beat it. Basically, you need to beat this for about 20 minutes. And see, now you can see it's getting, look at it, it's kind of balling up, and it's getting, the moisture is coming out of it. So I still have to mix this longer before I put it on there. It basically, it's kind of, look, it's kind of sticking to my hands. I know I should use rubber gloves and all because the lime will dry out your skin, but you know, I'm kind of old school idiot, so to speak. Say, throw shit on the wall and see what sticks. I guess it sticks. Old school plaster, lime plastering. That shit's sticking to the wall. Doing old school work now.
That's good.